In this episode, we are going to be reviewing the debut feature from Federico Fellini, which he co-directed with Alberto Lattuada. This is called Variety Lights from 1950, and it starred Peppino di Felippo, Carla del Poggio, and Giulietta Masina. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a podcast where I talk about films from all over the world and talk about how those stories are told on film. I want to welcome my guest today is Jack Criddle, who is the host of the radio show Play Morricone for Me. He's a videographer, editor, media professional. He has worked on numerous feature films and documentaries, and he's created web video content for CBS's Inside Edition, ehow.com, Mass Mocha, among others. His photography work has been published in Smithsonian Online, Take Magazine, and much more. Jack, welcome. Thanks for doing this today.
Thank you so much for having me, Robert, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. It's such a great concept for a radio show. What are some of your favorite scores from Italian films outside of Morricone?
I love Nino Rota and 8.5 and Amarcord in particular.
So
Mario Bava is a guy who I sort of got into a little bit, and he wasn't someone like Leone who always, had a composer as his man Friday he used time and time again. He worked with a number of composers and would work with one, with someone like Carlo Rusticelli, and then with some other guys, and then, with Rusticelli again. And I think he had more of, Mario Bava had, I think, more of an interesting technique of casting composers. Like he had a small stable of guys and thought of them almost as like actors, like who's better for this type of film, if it's a bit more of a gothic melodrama versus this composer. The things that I think the Italian genre filmmakers do so well is so seductive with the mixture of sex and violence as a kind of a deliciously evil cocktail. And the music, I think, does this really well.
We're talking about Variety Lights today, which was Fellini's first film, which he co-directed. Had you seen it before? Or was this a first viewing?
I had seen this one, I think, some years ago. I think it's a better film when you're older, when you've, I'm rewatching it in preparation for doing this. I think I liked it better than I did when I was in my teens. Because it's definitely a film about being a certain age in your life as a grown-up and screwing up.
That's a good way of putting it, because the main character Cecco Dal Monte, who's played by Peppino di Filippo, who's so great. I don't know, did you ever see Boccaccio 70, the film?
He's the guy with the billboard with the milk, the leche.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I didn't connect it at first until I looked into his filmography after watching it. But he has this expression of just being totally in his own head. Like he just looks like someone who's not present, who's just not all there. And this character is really, it's about him, and it's largely told from his point of view, because he's part of this theater group. And, they're like these vaudeville acts and circus type performers and street show performers, which is, classic Fellini, that he would revisit these kind of characters in every single one of his movies. And you strongly get the impression that this guy's shows are not good and that the only reason he's been able to continue to do it is because he has like some, he's got some women in it, and he's got some really attractive dancers, but to him he's like this great artist, like theater is everything to him. And he's ignorant of the fact that he's been totally broke for years, that he's never made any money off this. Not to say that talented people always make money as well, because we know the nature of show business. Talent does not equal success. But in his case, he seems sort of oblivious to that, you know. And suddenly when he meets Carla del Poggio, this Liliana, he's also, it's almost as if he convinces himself that she loves him, that they're in a relationship, when really she's just trying to get a job in his company in order to, as a stepping stone for her own career. But he refuses to see any of this because of this large, massive ego he has, which I thought was really just rooted in a deep insecurity. I don't know what your impression of Checho was.
Yeah, definitely. There's the insecurity and there's the elevated sense of self of the performers, and I think it's interesting the way that the movie is set up, where they're in the middle of the performance and then they're doing the encore and the curtain call in the very beginning, and it's very like, it's very stylized, very sexy. The editing is great. There's a whole, like, you get totally swept up in like, this is an amazing show. This is like the glamorous lives of show people, and he's in the center of it as his kind of little bowler hat, sort of semi Chaplin imitation character that he's playing, and then it's like, as soon as they get off stage, they have a situation where the hotelier that the troupe has ripped off has just, absconded with their ticket money, and they got nowhere to sleep, and like right out of the, as soon as the curtains close is when the illusion ends, and you see all of them, but really see Checho as they are, which is the living this hand to mouth existence, and not very good, neither great performances, nor are they organizational geniuses in terms of their operation.
Well, and they didn't even have like fare for the transit, when they're trying to get into like a cab, or that guy with the horse and buggy, they had to walk miles. And that's a good point, because you get the impression off the top that these are like good shows, and very quickly, or that these people are glamorous, and very quickly you find out that someone has been funding them for a couple of years, and he just takes all of the he takes all the money that they made that night, because he's sick of not getting paid back. But Fellini, I don't know if you ever saw The White Sheet, which I think he did right after this, but he was really interested in people's illusions, and looking at something like, and we do that all the time. You might look at celebrities on the red carpet or cover of magazines, and we see glamour, we see fame, we see but really we don't know anything that's going on in these people's lives. We don't know anything that's going on behind closed doors. And what's interesting, of course, is over the last 4 years or so, we've been hearing more and more of of abusive stories constantly going on around Hollywood, which was not some big secret for such a long time, but it's gone a lot deeper than I think anyone ever expected. Not that this is Hollywood, but it sort of has that same theme of you never really know what the truth is. We just think we know. We think we know what it is. And Peppino here as Checho, he's no different in his relationships and in his work. I mean, it's really fascinating. But I thought he was fantastic, and I love, of course, you have Fellini's wife in this, Giulietta Masina, who's his fiance. What was your impression of what her character Melina was all about?
Oh, I mean, I love her. So I am such a Giulietta Messina
She's
fan.
great.
Like I love her to bits. And she is she's the heart and soul of the film, really. She's and this was their this was their first real collaboration where she had a sizable. Well, obviously it's
Yeah.
Fellini directing for the first time, but this is, I think, also her first big role that she had ever done. And she's, I mean, I think she is like, uh, I would rival her against, honestly, Charlie Chaplin and
Yeah.
some of the great sad clowns of the silent era. As you know, the thing that really the thing that I've read some critiques of the film that she's just a little bit too naive in her relationship with Checho, and like a bit too forgiving. And
Right.
I mean, I can kind of see that argument, but I also think all the actors in this film, even though they're all really good, are playing these characters as their sort of archetypes. So it isn't exactly the story of how it would go down, probably, if it was a real theater troupe, if it was a docudrama of
Right.
the hand to mouth life of show people. This is also like a movie, and it its purpose is to deglamorize these performers, but also show you there's such a romantic view of their suffering and of their hustle. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the thing that some of the comparisons that I had read, a lot of folks think Fellini and Lattuada were influenced by All About Eve, which was like
Yeah.
a year before, I think, because it's a similar story.
Yeah. Same year, I
And
believe. It came out same year.
the same is that yeah,
50.
same year.
Yeah, 1950.
So it could have been influence, or it could have been just coincidence,
Coincidence.
something in the water.
Yeah.
But the thing I think, and the other one I was thinking of too, is uh the von Sternberg film, The Blue Angel, which has got a kind of a similar like toxic show business relationship.
Yeah,
But
I
what
still have to see that. I was planning to see it soon.
oh, it's good. I won't, well, if you haven't seen it, I won't like talk about it or ruin it, but it's got also a toxic relationship based around stage performers, and a romance that doesn't it, that one character is having and the other one is not. The thing though I think that really separates this film from those two I mentioned is like there's such a love for these losers as they were. I
Yeah.
mean, Fellini loves so much and respects so much the hustle of the guy with the singing goose who is going to go backstage and change clothes and then come out as the Indian fakir who eats light bulbs. Like
Right. Right.
he loves he's he's not impressed by the show, but he is so like he believes so much in the people and the will to do it and the
Yeah.
drive to struggle against the odds and keep doing it. And
Yeah, he's
tying
not
it back
making fun of
to
them. It's true. It's like he does
yeah,
love, like you get the sense that he's showing, I mean, certainly they're flawed and there's a lot of flaws in the way they look at things and in show business, but there's also a lot that there is a romantic part of it all. There is a lot to admire about people who hustle as they do, as you said.
mhm. Yeah, and I think to tie it back to Giulietta Messina, I mean, she's really the open heart on your sleeve of that love, of that love of poor struggling performers and vaudevillians and circus folk. And the thing that really broke my heart with her is when so they have an episode where they get invited to a rich aristocrat's house after one show, and it's really because the guy the guy has got the hots for the other woman, the
Yes,
woman
that's
who's
Liliana, the tall,
Liliana, right?
the one that Checho has got his eyes on.
Yeah. So it's a kind of a you know, he invites Liliana really, but the rest of them tag along to his house, and he's really got his designs on this young woman, and they there's an interesting thing because of course Checho also starts to get his designs on her too, and their relationship is kind of a transactional one of success and sex and or love, but he's also disgusted with this guy who's kind of doing the same, that he's doing better than him. And makes a big scene. They all get kicked out. They have
It's
kind
so
of like almost like
cringeworthy.
a group. They trudge. It's like the walk of shame, but with a group. It's like
Yeah.
6 or 12 people all doing the walk of shame. And um, so Giulietta Messina's character's father is he's kind of in the periphery, but I got the feeling that he's somewhat of the, like, he's financing it somehow, or he's like a little bit of the organizational or financial brains behind the troupe. And he gets exhausted because they're walking in the sun, and she goes back to get him, and the rest of them just kind of trudge on.
Yeah.
And not, not in a heartless way, but just in a, oh man. And it's like these, it's like these things you hear about herds of animals where we got to leave the weakest one behind. We're sorry. It's like, we've just got it built into our DNA. Like, we have to keep moving forward, and that's your loss. You fell down in the road. And Giulietta just gets this. This is really where she loses her fiance, where they fully separate. Is she goes back to help her dad up, and the rest of them are just, poor
Yeah.
bastards.
And you see that at that point she's looking on at her fiance with this, the new woman in the pack, Liliana, and she's very much putting together that he is no longer interested in her. He's interested in Liliana. And later on, when he's kicked out of the group and everyone turns on him because he wants to make Liliana the star, and he doesn't really have respect for these people who have been with him for such a long time. And he begs her, when he has this idea for a new show with those street performers he met overnight, which was really interesting. Those creatures of the night, so to speak, which again is classic Fellini. And he begs her, for the money, and he almost makes her think that he was wrong, and he couldn't help himself with her. And she sort of pities him and gives him the money, but then right away, he makes this woman the star. So you don't know if maybe he was kind of telling the truth, maybe he saw that this woman wanted nothing to do with him, or maybe maybe it was a total con on his part, that he just figured out, if I make her sympathize with me, I could get the money in order to start the show. I don't know what you thought of that scene.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where you kind of have to go like my feeling about Checho as a character is he's not that smart, and he is emotional, and he is I feel like emotionally immature in the way like kids are, and like a lot of the ways he reacts to stuff, even though he's in his late 30s early 40s, is really the way that teenage boys will
Yeah,
respond when
that's a good point.
for some, I can remember this when I was younger. Like I was like it would have been a miscommunication, but you would have, I would have taken it to heart, and really get gotten really bent out of shape about it
I think
when
I was flashing on my life at times as well. I could sort of, I could certainly relate to seeing someone I was interested in clearly with someone else that they were more interested in, and the jealousy. I could clearly, I was like, oh man, like, but it is that, not that doesn't happen to adults, but it's the way in which he handles it, in such a teenage fashion, as you said. He just tries to force his way in.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that so I think the way that like Checho falls in love and or is you know very easily led by a pretty face first, and then having already starting to feel that way in a way he can't control, will then start to concoct the plan. So this is a thing of like falling for the woman who's the new addition to the show, who's kind of who's a little pushy and worming her way into kind of becoming the star, and he falls for her, and then he's got to kind of put the plan together, and the plan is to do away with the rest of the troupe, go and get
Right.
some money. There's an interesting thing too, because it's like comparing the two different ways. And I also think this is so interesting talking about you know teenage sort of romances and also adult relationships, given that you never want to make the mistake of reading too much autobiography into a filmmaker's work, because they are in the business of telling stories. They
Right.
are like the best at playing pretend and not like really talking about themselves. But interesting in the way I think that you have to think both Fellini and Lattuada identify a little bit with Cecco, and they cast both of their wives as his two love interests, because of course Carla del Poggio is Lattuada's wife,
Oh, I didn't
and
even
who
know
I
that. Wow.
no yeah
That's
so
funny.
yeah so and I looked this up. I'm not as like I haven't seen as many Lattuada films. Not very many of them are very easy to find in the
Yeah,
States,
I
except
don't know
for
his films.
Mafioso.
I don't know his films either. And apparently it's not even very well known as to, what was Fellini doing on this film and what was Lattuada doing? Like, did they share responsibilities, or was it just
Mhm.
organic in terms of day to day? I mean, no one really knows.
What I had read, and again, I think it's like with a little bit of a grain of salt, especially with Fellini, because he was known to embellish facts and just sort of spin yarns. Fellini had said that he cooked up the story and he came up with the setting and a lot of it. People, fans of his later work have pointed out the similarities and the fascinations he has with the subject matter. Fellini had said apparently that like Lattuada was in the driving seat. He knew what he was doing, and it was more or less him calling the shots with like, "What do you think, Federico?" Yeah, and it was just like, see, like everything that Lattuada did was okay by Fellini, but Fellini being his first directing gig, and Lattuada having done neo-realist movies since the early 40s, he was a bit more the seasoned pro, and so
Oh, right.
he was happier to stay out of the way. I mean, having said that, that could be, that that could be like false modesty, or it could be a yarn, or we don't entirely know. And we certainly have the film itself to look at, where we go like, yes, it feels very like a Fellini film. We
Yeah,
can see the guy who went on to do La Strada and Eight and a Half and so forth.
yeah. I mean, certainly always having empathy and interesting in these kind of hard scrabble existences, which goes into I Vitellone and La Strada and Knights of Cabiria and other films. So it certainly is very Fellini-esque to me. I didn't know that the woman who played Liliana was the other filmmaker's wife. She was interesting, but you're right in the sense that these characterizations are not complex. They are more like archetypes. I suppose Peppino there's more nuance to his character, but it seems as if it wasn't really supposed to necessarily totally be about these characters. It was supposed to be it was meant to convey everything about what we're talking about in terms of the nature of show business, the nature of the way these people are living, the nature of how they work, almost documentary in a way, which I'm sure is connected to like the neo-realist tradition. How do you think he sort of is able to make these naive one-dimensional characters work and make it so truthful at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it might honestly be and I say this kind of with some ignorance of Latuada's work, because I've read about his other films, but the only other one I've seen besides this is Mafioso. As I understand it, the Italian neorealism, and having sort of the the political movement that led to making films about ordinary people and about the the suffering of being bombed out and having lost a war and the hard scrabble life. And that was, that was kind of all they could do after World War II, really, because basically all the film studios were bombed. So
Yeah.
the stuff that was already in the water, like Rome Open City and Bicycle Thieves, that may have been, I think it's sort of, there's that element to it, but there is also this thing where with Fellini, it's almost like a fairy tale. It's almost,
Yes.
it does have this quality where um I think he was the type of guy who really just looked at the world and kind of saw archetypes and
Yeah.
saw the larger than life and kind of saw like what it meant in a grander, more cosmic sense.
Yeah.
And it seems like this kind of reflects that.
Yeah, that's really well said, and no, that's probably why no one is really like him. I mean, there are people that, there's some similarities, but he's so original in that sense, and daring in a lot of ways in his portrayals. But it's interesting how he can combine fantasy with at times having sort of one-dimensional archetype characters, but making them so truthful at the same time. What really surprised me towards the end was when Liliana gets, she gets this show in Paris, and she's going to leave the show that Cecco's doing. I was surprised how he accepts that she needs to go. It's sort of, it was basically a moment of consciousness where I think he comes to realize, sure, in probably a simplistic way, that he cannot hang on to her, that she's she has talent and she's very beautiful, and you see her even in that show she goes to in Paris. They show that the star of that show is getting jealous of her because everyone, the people are putting more attention on her and clapping for her. And I thought it was interesting that he accepts it in that moment. And then you see in the end when he's, you get the feeling he's going to go back with Giulietta Messina. They're on the train and they're smiling at each other, and then boom, it sees his eyes go towards another woman, and he's, hey, are you interested in show business? I thought that was so genius, that he's making you think this person is growing and evolving, and he just, no, that's not the case. Maybe he was, and then he fell back on his old habits. I don't know how you felt about that end. I just thought that was just pure gold.
It's interesting. I think so. This sort of love triangle with Cecco and Messina as his wife, and Del Poggio is like, with Liliana is like, it's interesting in the way, so they all romanticize the theater, but they are also but Liliana is more calculated, and she really being sort of introduced as like a country bumpkin who was only in one dancing competition and beauty contest. She really has a very good sense of human nature, and a kind of a de-romanticized, de-glamorized view of human nature. And whereas the other two are kind of made for each other because they are such big, open-hearted dreamers. There's an interesting thing that happens in the movie where, we have three scenes in the movie where the characters, each of the couples, each of the links in the triangle, as it were, like part ways. I mean, we have this super sad, heart-rending scene where the herd trudges on without Giulietta and her father, and that's in the sort of the first act. We have near the conclusion where there's this, like, it's really upsetting, but there's ultimately resolution in letting her go when she goes on to the big show. And then there's the scene in the middle, which almost passes you by if you're not looking at it carefully. But when Cecco is taking Liliana around to meet all these booking agents. And there's like it's like some kind of convention where there's a big crowd of vaudeville booking agents. And he's like, oh, yeah, remember me? And the guy's like, yeah, get out of here, will you? I'm busy. And this happens. This is like, 3 or 4 times that he's going around, and he's like, it's so painful because he's taking her by the hand and trying to be like, look at all the guys I know, and no one wants to talk to him. And Liliana gets this look. It's like the 3rd or 4th guy who tells him to shove off. And she gets this, and it's kind of like you miss it if you're not looking at her, because it's one of the ones that they do in one shot, following the characters throughout this crowd. They don't do it. They don't like lead you to it with close-ups or really spell it out for you.
Yeah.
But she gets this little look that's like, oh, I don't need this guy. I can do better on my own. She hasn't quite got it together yet. And so she's not gonna, let the axe fall right there and part ways with him. But she does, I feel like that is their split. Like that is their, her being a more calculating and sort of better and more guarded, cards close to the chest student of human nature, as young and as kind of naive as she is. She doesn't have a big moment of that's really as emotionally as kind of, I don't want to say melodramatic, but like the other two have a really big sad moment where they part ways, and she has a little like, oh yeah, okay, it's just a little kind of it, and it's the time you realized you fell out of love with somebody, or you didn't need somebody anymore, or as Woody Allen says, we got on our hands a dead shark.
Well, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up in terms of Fellini doesn't like have these big close-ups so that the audience, like everything you're describing, he's not like, or sorry, I shouldn't say only Fellini because this is also Lattuada. But I'm more familiar with Fellini, so I know that just looking at La Dolce Vita, for example, he doesn't go so close in, and so you have to lean in a little more to pick up on different things, the behaviors and the way in which people are interacting within the frame, because he's not making such a point of this character is now feeling this character is now feeling that. I mean, obviously sometimes, yes, I mean, you can't help but see it, but, and obviously you want to see it, but sometimes he kind of hangs back, and he's making you a participant in that sense. And then so with each viewing, you discover so much more. Well, Jack, thanks so much for taking the time to come on. I really appreciate it. Where's the best place for people to find your radio show or follow you on social media?
Oh, thank you. So the radio show, the service that the radio show is hosted on is called Mixcloud, which is like mix and a like a cloud in the sky. So mixcloud.com, and it's Play Morricone for me, which is Play MORRICONE for me. And yeah, they can check us out on there. And I will say the best thing probably about my radio show as a listener is I cover a lot of different subjects because I am pretty interested in a whole bunch of different types of cinema and music. So if you put one on and you really hate it or dislike it or react strongly to it, don't give up. Listen to a different one.
Okay, great. And I know you're also at jack-criddle.com, and your Instagram is southbound6. So I'll leave the links to your Instagram and your radio show and your site in the description box below. So thanks again, Jack, for coming on. Please come again to talk about another film sometime.
I would love to. It has been a pleasure being on Bellissimo at the Movies. And yeah, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. If you are now currently listening to this on the audio version of the podcast and you've run out of episodes, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I've ever recorded is uploaded to. youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I'm also on Patreon. For those of you who don't know what Patreon is an exclusive membership where creators such as myself post bonus content at a monthly, very small fee. Head over to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies to see what I offer. There are different tiers and you can pick which one intrigues you the most. Everything is based on polls. The polls go out at the beginning of every single month and you vote on various things that I'm interested in reviewing and talking about. And from there, you are very much going to be a part of the decision making based on voting on those polls. So once again, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head right here to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release a new video or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Please also click a like on this video, and I will see you in the next episode.